And I can tell you that from a programming side, when we found out that Freddie and Fitzsimmons would no longer be part of the late night slot here on 104.5 The Team, it was disappointing, but the new show from 3 to 7 p.m. is Freddie and Harry on ESPN Radio. It happens right during the same time slot. So joining us on the phone right now from ESPN Radio, good friend of the Drive and good friend of the Capital Region, our friend Freddie Coleman. Freddie, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Good morning, my brother. How's everything going with you guys?
Things are going very well. Thank you for the time joining us today. And I have to ask you about the new show. We were just catching up very briefly before we went on the air. But how has the new show been going? How are you liking the afternoon slot?
Well, I knew that working with Harry was going to be a blast, so I wasn't really worried about that. But it's been better than I could have ever imagined. Because we're so juvenile, even when we don't want to be, it just happens with our show all the time. But people know what they're going to get each and every afternoon from us. We don't sugarcoat anything. We're going to be uniformly ourselves, and a lot of people have been able to feel that so far. So it's been a great, great start to something that just got started September 5th, and it feels like we've been together for more than a minute. It's been a blast so far.
That's a great feeling to have this early on, and I'm thrilled to be able to hear that from you. And again, we have the Drive on from 3 to 7. Make sure you download Freddie and Harry in podcast form wherever you get your podcasts so you can hear episodes and hear what they're chatting about. There is a ton going on in the NFL, specifically in the New York scene right now. We just finished up seeing the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets seemingly go in two opposite directions during the course of a single game. Beginning with the Buffalo Bills, the changes made on the offense and Ken Dorsey being let go, a new offensive coordinator brought in an interim capacity. Were you surprised to see the move made by the Buffalo Bills, and do you think that could have the intended effect and get Buffalo back into contention?
Well, Dan, I'm at the point right now that nothing really surprises me, especially when you have a Buffalo Bills team that they had to have looked at themselves and said, okay, what can we do to make sure that our championship window doesn't keep closing and closing and closing, and are we wasting the best years when it comes to our quarterback Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, the other playmaker that they really need to get going on this football team? So I was not surprised when you think about that they moved on from Ken Dorsey and put Joe Brady, installed him as the offensive coordinator. But if you're the Buffalo Bills, it had the desired effect that you were looking for. That ball was spread out all over the field, but Stephon Diggs got a decent amount of targets, got a lot of targets early. They weren't waiting till the game that was going to come to him. They involved the running game. It was just a different way they went about creating those explosive plays on offense. And even though the Jets' defense early on was really able to keep them out of the end zone, the more snaps they kept being out there against the Jets' defense and the Jets' offense completely screwing things up, as usual, Zach Wilson's quarterback, the more you knew that Buffalo was going to find a way to make some plays. They got those explosion plays. They got into the red zone and got touchdowns. So you could not have picked a better start to move on from Ken Dorsey as an offensive coordinator and having Brady installed, and that looked pretty good in game one, getting 32 points against that defense.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It did. And, Allen himself is such an interesting case study for me, just with the way that he plays the game. So very aggressive, and you know that you're going to get the touchdown numbers. You're going to get the turnovers. How do you characterize the quarterback, Josh Allen? How do you look at him from your perspective in terms of just the way he plays the game, the aggressive nature, and what is he doing when he is most successful is my question for you.
Well, for me, you can be aggressive and you can have the talent and ability that Josh Allen has, but you got to be very, very judicious in when you can be aggressive with the football. I think the one thing that Josh Allen has suffered from is that he believes that his arm can overcome anything. It doesn't matter what kind of defense is out there, what Mother Nature has in store, whatever mistakes he's made early or the offense trying to get a spark. He always believes that his arm will be able to overcome any kind of problems that will present itself. And that can be true when you're playing against a team that's not as good as you. Your talent is going to be better than theirs. But when you're playing a defense, at times that we've seen Josh Allen try to force things, and even against a not-so-great defense where he's tried to do that, in the National Football League, you're going to get what you get. Now, granted, he threw an interception against the Jets this past Sunday, the seventh straight game he's done that. But it was different in that it wasn't so much of a force as at the end of the first half. You can live with that, especially when that was a calculated risk. But so many times, then, we see him take these kind of risks. You're thinking, dude, what are you doing? You can't put the defense on the short field, and you can't have people looking at you side-eye by looking at you and saying, you have way too much talent and intellect, football-wise and human being-wise, to decide that was the kind of decision you should make because you believe that your arm can outlast any kind of problem that may come up throughout a football game involving Josh Allen and the Bills.
Before we move on from the Bills, because it's a great way to put it, that risk and reward is something that we seem to see from him on a weekly basis, and it just ends up being a matter of can he contain that or not. Before we move on to the Jets and other teams in the NFL, the schedule is what it is at this point for the Bills. There's some tough opponents coming up, both going into and coming out of the bye. Do you find it realistic that there could be a path back to a playoff spot for this group, and what's it going to take for that to happen?
Well, if they're going to do that against the schedule, like you mentioned, when you got the Dolphins and the Cowboys and the Chiefs and the Eagles part of that schedule coming up, then you're going to need the defense to get back to where they used to be at the beginning of the year. And I know they've been compromised, losing three terrific guys part of that defense, including Matt Milano, who's playing as good of a linebacker as anybody in the NFL before he suffered that torn ACL against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Your defense is going to have to carry the weight. You have to trust your offense is not going to do the same things that got you in this position where you're a 6-5 football team and you believe you should maybe be a 9-win football team. But now that defense has to be those playmakers. And even every time we turn around, somebody in defense keeps getting injured.
Right.
But you have to overcome that if you're the Buffalo Bills. You got to find a way to be that complementary football team that after week one versus the Jets, that we saw that for 3 weeks before they went overseas and lost to Jacksonville, and then everybody started falling apart and getting injured and everything like that. That's the path for the Buffalo Bills to get back to the playoffs. You got to be able to be that defense, even with a compromised defense, to make some plays. And this way, if your offense is not up to snuff, your defense can hold their own and make sure you don't lose those tough games that we've seen this team lose time and time again, especially when that championship window keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, the more problems that develop in front of you if you're the Buffalo Bills.
The voice you're hearing is that of the fantastic Freddie Coleman. He's the host of Freddie and Harry. That's airing right now from 3 to 7 on local ESPN radio stations. You can still download episodes of Freddie and Harry wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're at it, you might as well follow him on Twitter at Coleman ESPN for updates on the show and everything else going on in the sports world. So the Bills come out of that one the victor. The Jets come out of that once again in a bit of disarray. I mean, it got to the point where Zach Wilson was struggling to even run out onto the field and not trip over himself, and the game seemed to be a bit of a metaphor of that. But, I mean, how can we continue to move forward in New York with Zach Wilson being in the conversation? Did we finally reach the point last night where maybe the Jets are considering the move that every fan seems to want them to make?
Well, we've reached that point, but now if you're the New York Jets, you can't have any excuse to not to have reached that point by now, because Zach Wilson has shown after 3 seasons or close to 3 seasons that he cannot be a quality starting quarterback in the National Football League. And it can't be about placating Aaron Rodgers, who is a mentor to him. It can't be about Zach Wilson's feelings. And to be completely fair, the New York Jets have not put Zach Wilson in a winnable situation because they should not have drafted him with the second pick in the first place back in 2021, but that's a whole other conversation.
Sure.
The minute that they told everybody, Dan, that this is the guy that can be a franchise quarterback, and everybody said him over all the other guys you could have taken or gone out to somebody in free agency, and it also did not help Zach Wilson that last year when the team had enough of him, Mike White gets in there and the team rallied around him when it comes to a guy that was drafted a lot lower than Zach Wilson. That should have been a very telling sign, and it should not have been allowed to get to another year with him being a starting quarterback. The Jets should have said, we're moving on Aaron Rodgers. We're going to get a quality backup quarterback, and you send Zach Wilson on his way. But they were so hell-bent to prove to people that they could make him a quality starting quarterback that they completely unraveled their football team. So if this is not the final straw for the New York Jets, then what are you doing if you're Joe Douglas, the general manager, or Robert Saleh as the head coach of the New York Jets? Because you cannot allow this guy to completely take down a defense that is playing too many snaps and is getting worn out, and they're tired of making an excuse for a quarterback that they know cannot play and has not been able to show he can play consistently as a starting quarterback in the NFL.
And that leaves me and a lot of fans with the same question that I'm sure you see all the time, which is, well, why do you keep trotting him out there week after week? It's nothing more than an opinion-based question, but does this lay at the feet of the coaching staff? Does this go higher up to the general manager? Could it go to the ownership? I have no idea where this is coming from, but in your opinion, where do you think that maybe this could be coming from within the Jets organization?
Well, when you draft a quarterback that high, to me, that's a general manager and ownership decision when it comes to leaving him out there. When you draft a guy with the second pick in the draft, they've tried to give him every opportunity to show that he can't play, even though he's done that time and time again. And even in good moments, it has been something you say to yourself, okay, that's going to be the turning point for Zach Wilson. I can't recall any game or any throw I said, okay, now he's gotten it, because he has not gotten it. So that's why Robert Saleh early this year, when he had to plead the fifth, when he was on the Michael Kay show on ESPN New York 98.7 FM, that was the way of saying that if I had my choice, I would have sat this guy down by now. But I got people above my title grade that don't want that to happen. Well, now those people above the title grade of the head coach, they can't allow this to continue. You may not want Tim Boyle out there, but anybody not named Zach Wilson will be a better option right now. You cannot allow the fact you said to yourself, we don't want to admit to a mistake. It's okay. Everybody's not perfect. Everybody will have draft failures. This has been a draft failure for the New York Jets. Stop running him out there, because you're not doing anybody in that organization any favors by thinking you still believe that Zach Wilson can play when he has shown you time and time again that he can.
And naturally, the Jets are now in the situation, Freddie, where they once again have more of the quarterback issues compared to their fellow tenants at MetLife Stadium. I am a Giants fan, so what I watched with Tommy DeVito yesterday still hasn't really added up to me as a fan and just an observer of the game. I love the story, but it comes in a moment of pure chaos for this Giants group with what this season has turned into. Of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Tommy DeVito, but I'm also just curious to hear your perspective on where the Giants currently sit and what you think the quarterback position for them may look like moving forward.
Well, how much of what we've seen in really the last game and a half from Tommy DeVito is an indictment of Daniel Jones?
Yeah.
Because Saquon Barkley looked a lot better with Tommy DeVito in the second half of the Cowboys game and all day yesterday versus Washington Commanders. And I understand it. Tommy DeVito, a guy that's a wonderful, wonderful story, where his roommates are his mom and dad living in New Jersey. Any underdog story like that people are going to be able to wrap their heads around and wrap their arms around. But I go by what my eyes tell me. And that offense looked a lot more fluid the second time they played Washington compared to the first time they played the Washington Commanders when you had Tyrod Taylor as your quarterback. So to me, that's an indictment on how Daniel Jones has not been able to respond to coaching by the New York Giants, that Tommy DeVito was barely year one, barely week 3, and he looked like that. He had better throws yesterday than Zach Wilson has done his entire Jet career when it comes to three seasons. So I wonder how much the Giants are having buyer's remorse by saying, man, we committed over $80 million in guaranteed money to a quarterback that we were hoping to believe in, but yet the running back that makes this whole thing go, we decided to short him on his money in a long-term contract. So I wonder what kind of decision-making may go into the Giants' plans. What if Tommy DeVito plays like this the rest of the year, and the team rallies more to him than to Daniel Jones?
Right.
Then what kind of organization decision you're going to have to make to say, we still believe in Daniel Jones, but yet you guys seem to play better for and with a guy that a lot of people didn't think would be an NFL starting quarterback at any time in his NFL career, no matter how long that was going to last.
Right, and then you also enter the conversation of, well, the Giants were looking at a top pick, and between Caleb Williams and Drake May, there are numerous different quarterbacks you might want to try to draft and develop, but if DeVito starts winning games, catch 22, then you're falling out of that position. Could you see the Giants, though, adding a rookie quarterback, depending on how things go?
I think you're going to have to investigate that and really think about that if you're the New York Giants, because the draft class, this quarterback draft class, there's so many intriguing prospects where you can say, man, if we decide to move on from Daniel Jones, or do we keep Tommy DeVito as a backup, but we can't take a chance on passing on a potential Bo Nix of Auburn or Michael Penix Jr. of Washington or anybody else that may be out there that is not at the top of my mind right now. So you have to think about the future of your organization. If you still believe in Daniel Jones, then you put him on blast and say, this is the last year. You got a guaranteed contract. If it's not working out, it's not costing us any money if you're not on this franchise after 2024. But if you're the New York Giants, you can't have anything that's off the table. Everything should be on the table, especially at that position and especially in their division. Because you look at the Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott keeps playing like this, or he's not going anywhere. Jalen Hurts got his team to Super Bowl last year in Philadelphia. He's not going anywhere. Washington believes that they have their quarterback when it comes to Sam Howell. They got to provide an offensive line for him, but when they've been able to protect him, he's been able to make some plays. It seems that everybody in that division does not have a quarterback question, except when it comes to you as a New York Giants team to make the playoffs last year. So that is something that to make sure more questions don't creep up. How do you answer that question in terms of what do you do in the future whether you're going to have Daniel Jones a part of it after 2024, or you got to draft his successor in 2024 and make sure he's ready to be in place in 2025.
It is a crucial question, one that needs to be answered sooner rather than later by Joe Shane and company. He is Freddie Coleman, host of Freddie and Harry, 3 to 7 p.m. on ESPN radio affiliates across the nation, as well as ESPN radio on Sirius XM. And, of course, you got to make sure you download episodes of Freddie and Harry wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that kind of stuff. Freddie, thank you so much for the time here this afternoon. Congratulations again with everything at the beginning of the show. And most importantly, also, thank you so much for all you do here in the Capital Region for the Coaches versus Cancer basketball. I've been lucky enough to be able to meet you in person twice during those events. And on behalf of everybody in the area who is involved with that and beyond, we cannot thank you enough for what you do with that as well.
Well, the Capital District is always going to hold a special place in my heart because so many people are not friends, they're family as far as I'm concerned. So anytime I get a chance to hang out and have a conversation, talk with family, it's always going to be a good thing. So I appreciate those kind words. And by the way, have a happy Thanksgiving to you and everybody up in the Capital District, and be safe this weekend.